All right, thank you, everyone. We appreciate you giving us a break. I think some of us will continue to do a little lunching while we're working through this in the interest of everyone's time. We will move on to RC 21, Library Media, with Joan McGettigan, who I know is zooming in with us. So Joan, thank you for joining us this afternoon. Appreciate it. And I will turn it over to you.
Great. Good afternoon. First, thank you to the board and to the district for your continued support of our school libraries. For the 23-24 budget, we have kept our budget flat in total, in that we have no increase from last year's budget. However, we are shifting some of our funds to online resources, such as a school-wide subscription to the New York Times for the high school. Our on-video demand service Swank is now going to be at the middle and high school. And we are adding a few databases for research and to support curriculums such as Statista and some Gale-specific databases for science and social sciences. Therefore, you will see a decrease in lines 230.01 and 230.03 accessions and periodicals, and an increase in line 2305 for online subscriptions. We look forward to the coming renovations at Hindley Homes and Royal, and of course, look forward to our new library learning commons under construction at Ox Ridge. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Joan. I will open it up to both questions or thoughts. Good. Sure, Julie. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Joan. I was just curious how it's decided what goes here versus software. How do you guys make that decision on where to capture these expenses? Is it how they're used or?
We look at a lot of different factors. So we look at usage. We have discussions with teachers and department chairs all the time about meeting their needs. We talk to our students quite a bit. So the addition of a couple of those databases has been really coming from students who are doing research in science, and we're looking to have some additional resources, and it makes more sense to shift some of that to online to have the most current material for them, as opposed to purchasing books.
Thank you.
Hey, Rich, was this a broader, I think, trend that you're doing on the 13035 software? Kind of wound that down? Is it you presented us with a good list of all the software we have, all the costs? Is that kind of you're centralizing that, or?
For the majority of software throughout the district, it's in RC 15.
Right.
There might be some smaller ones that you'll see in library and art, but for the most part, anything that touches everyone is in RC 15.
Okay, good. Anything else on library and media? And we'll open it up to RTM Education. Casey, I saw you pop up there.
Yep, nope, no questions.
Thanks, Casey. Jack, you good? Thank you. CDSP, you're good? CPAC?
No questions.
All right, thank you. Joan, I know you're up after Emily, so we'll see you back shortly. So thank you. We'll move on
My
to
pleasure.
RC 17 Health. We've got Emily Merritt online, right? Hi, Emily. How are you?
I'm great. How are you? Can you all hear me?
Good. Thanks for joining us.
Sure. Thank you. So just as a formal introduction, my name is Emily Merritt, and I started as the director of nursing services for Darien Public Schools in July 2022. I first just want to thank you all for your continued support of the Health Services Department. As a former school nurse at Holmes and now the director of nursing services, I've always felt very supported by the board as well as a larger community. And this is just important, setting a positive tone for our department. So I just want to thank you in advance. It's an exciting and dynamic time for us. So we're spending less energy and attention on pandemic protocols. So we're really able to focus more on our mission, which is to support the physical, mental, and social health of our students. This year's budget remains largely unchanged. The one exception is that we're transferring some funds that were allotted to periodicals and professional library purchases. Sounds similar to what libraries doing before me. And we are putting that into professional development. This funding allocation reflects the priority that we're placing on professional development opportunities to reinforce current nursing practices and to anticipate changing health needs. Anticipated professional development opportunities include CPR recertification for all of our nurses, as well as substitute nurses, annual membership to the National Association of School Nurses, trainings offered by Connecticut Association of School Nurses. And we're now doing a monthly professional development lecture series where we invite local pediatric health providers to come in to speak to us about their specialty. This year alone, we've been able to have an ENT come in to speak on ear concerns, a dermatologist to speak about pediatric rashes, orthopedic concerns, concussion management. And in addition, we're doing some training and we have new vision and hearing screening tools, the administration and management of Narcan, which is just to support a new state policy, and Stop the Bleed, which was a training. We were trained to use tourniquets and other techniques for bleeding emergencies. You can all I'm very biased, but you can all take great pride in the group of nurses that we have at Darien. They're truly exceptional in supporting the healthy and learning environment in our schools. And after that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you for stepping in the role and all that you do. And I know it's good to be part of coming out of the pandemic and focusing on.
Very good. Yes.
So real quick question between Emily and Marge. Are we fully staffed on the nursing front, Marge? And that is a challenge also, that profession also. Okay, but we're fully staffed. And then Rich, real quick, 42003, just a $10,000 thing streaming across there continuously. Just a little color on that.
So that's the payment to Dr. Kenneth Beck,
Okay,
the school's medical advisor.
great. Thank you. All right,
I
Sarah.
just had a question about Dr. Kenefick as well. We saw a lot of him recently in the past few years, and this rate remains the same regardless.
He has not asked for anything.
Okay.
Next
And
question.
a question, a question for
Strike that.
Emily. Thank you, Emily, for being here. I'm just really curious about, and I don't know that you have hard data for this at all, but what, in terms of mental health versus physical health of our students, the nurses often get, the elementary school, the stomach aches go down to the nurse, and that's often anxiety. Like, do you have an idea of how much of the nurse's role is physical health versus mental health?
I don't have any hard, I can just tell you anecdotally, I think in the high school, it would probably be a larger percentage. And I think in the elementary school, unfortunately, we're seeing more and more of that. We are spending a lot more time building our relationships with the school psychologists and making sure that together we have a plan for it. We always want them to feel comfortable to go to the school nurse, but a lot of times we're not the appropriate space for someone to have stomach ailments and things like that. But it's definitely on our forefront, and we've done a lot of our training. And I also have a offline training on mental health, which all the nurses have done as well. It's medications and pharmacology and things like that. But unfortunately, it is becoming a larger and larger issue that we're trying to stay on top of and address appropriately.
That was the point behind my question is, do our nurses need more training, more professional development to deal with that aspect of it versus, the physical health?
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot of great online opportunities, a couple that I've done and I've shared with the school nurses. So everyone knows, one of the nice things is that we do have these funds for professional development, and so many things are now online that they all know, where we're at. We've really tried to tighten up. We've safety plans and risk assessments and things like that. So we tried to tighten that up because that is actually housed in the health chart of a student. So all the nurses need to know what that means and et cetera. So again, yes, I appreciate the question. And yes, I think we're all cognizant of the fact that that's going to be, more and more of our time and expertise will be spent on that.
So Sarah, I appreciate that question. I would just, Emily, and when our director of mental health joined, I see that as part of the presentation of connecting the dots again on our nurses, the physical aspect of what the nurses do for our students and the mental health component of it. So good question. Jill.
Related to that, in the narrative, expand under PD, expanding nursing practice. And you did certainly go through an extensive list, and I appreciate that. But I'm curious from a driver perspective, what's driving the need to increase this expansion of practice? Is it, or what are the drivers?
Right. No, absolutely. I think there's twofold. I think it's just the reality that things are always changing and that health needs are always changing. And I think we always want to be current and on top of that. But I also think that, we, the complexity, the medical complexity of our student population continues to increase. And we're proud of the fact that, we're not going to let a medical complication or so on stop someone from their local access to the Darien public schools. But our range of students with medical needs right now continues to increase, continues to bring in. We have students from diabetics using all their different types of their instruments and so on. We want to make sure that they're staying in the classroom, they're accessing learning and things like that. So that's a nursing skill. We also have students that get tube fed every day. So we have to deal with that. So there's just a host of things. So I think it's just, we never want to feel like we can't provide students with the education because of a medical concern. So as a result, and a lot of our nurses, we come in from acute settings and it's just a very different, in terms of the, some of the medical needs that we have. So.
Thank you.
Kara.
Hi, this actually isn't a budget question, but I figure a couple of people asked me and I thought this might be the perfect time to ask.
Mhm.
After the incident on Monday Night Football, somebody asked me if we have defibrillators, and if we do, where are they and who knows how to use them?
Yep. So all the coaches, so there is a defibrillators, AEDs, specific for the athletic department, and they use them for the games and for that situation. But other than that, we have in the high school, I think we have 4 or 5 that we're continuing to monitor. And the ones that we have are the same models that Post has. So we literally can swap it out and they can take ours and go to the hospital with it. So we make sure that we have all the relevant information and so on. But yes, absolutely. And that was probably 5 or 6 years ago in Connecticut. There was an incident, and I think that really drove the force there. So every one of our schools is equipped with it. We have a medical emergency response team in every one of our schools, which involves not only the nurses, but staff members, teachers, and so on. They're all CPR trained. They all know when there's a medical emergency, who responds, how they respond, and so on. And we've done this year alone, every school has done at least one medical emergency drill as our one of our drills, our safety drills.
Thank you.
Any other questions or thoughts on RC 17 health? Casey, anything from
Just really quickly, just any supplies related to COVID. I just am flipping back to the COVID line as well. I don't see any change in health supplies. So were there no costs, or were they all state funded? Any changes there?
So in terms of COVID, that I think Rich will address that, but I will tell you that we make sure that we have enough masks. Our test kits that were given to us by the state, they all expired at the end of February. So we're making sure that we make good use of it and distribute it. And then we'll have questions about whether we want to continue to purchase more test kits for the future. But we make sure that we have enough masks and whatever we need to, sanitation, hand sanitizers, things like that, whatever we feel like we need. So we have not, right now we're good.
Okay.
We're inundated, but we're making sure that we try to get them out and get them used, by anyone needs them.
Rich, anything to add on COVID?
We haven't purchased any COVID related supplies this year.
Yeah.
We do have the COVID RC, and it's really all historical actuals. The tests that Emily spoke of were provided from the state. And so we have that quantity of tests to give out should anybody be experiencing.
Yeah, no, I was just seeing that no cost in 2020. And then I saw on the COVID line, 8,000 in 2021. That's why I was asking on the other P&L. So thank you for that.
RTMFB, Jack? Good. CDSP? Good. CPAC?
No questions.
Any public comment on health RC 22 in person or online? Emily, thank you very much for joining us on a Saturday. Appreciate all that you do.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you.
very
Thank
much.
you all.
We will move back to RC 22. Thank you. Technology and education. We have Joan back on with us, and Gregory. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for welcoming me and your continued support from the board and the town of Darien for all that we do down in technology and engineering. So the budget looks a little bit out of whack compared to last year because some of the robotics funds, as you know, have been rolled into RC 22. So I'll kind of highlight some of my changes, maybe some of the major changes from the technology and engineering budget, and then I might segue over to Joan for some of the robotics portions of that. So in terms of our budget for this year, there's not too much of a change. Teaching supplies is up for me about $1,000 coming this year. Everything's pretty much status quo. I think you remember from last year, some of the increase of costs may have come from the DIY class. There's been a lot of interest in that. And that uses a lot of supplies, copper for plumbing and electrical. Those things get a little bit expensive as kids run through some of those. Some of the other things that have increased compared to last year, again, it's our professional development budget. We're hoping to send 2 teachers to one of 2 professional development opportunities that are out of state. One of those being the ISTE conference or the International Technology Education and Engineering Association conference. Both of those are out of state. And I just believe it's really difficult for teachers to get there. When they go there, they spend thousands of dollars out of pocket to continue their learning. And for that reason, a lot of times they don't want to go. And I'm just thinking in comparison to the corporate world where these are 100% funded to for individuals to continue to learn. I want teachers to continue to learn. So I'm hoping to be able to provide them with the funds to be able to do that outside of school to continue their learning. Some new equipment. We haven't had new equipment in quite a while. We're increasing and on top of robotics. So we have robotics, it's kind of being embedded into our curriculum as well. The fuel cell program has been transitioned to robotics, so we're building up that. One of the new equipment that we're adding is a new welder. We do have welders already, but we're increasing that to support both of our manufacturing and CAD classes, as well as the robotics program. And you might hear and see in the background, actually today is kickoff for First Robotics. I have some kids in the background.
Wow.
Guys, you want to say hi quick?
Oh, gosh.
So these are our robotics. It was a big event today in Wolcott, which is the hub for First Robotics.
Okay.
And some of these students are from our classes as well as the club, and they're in the background planning for the robotics event right now. So that welder will help us out. And as I mentioned in the past, part of our 5-year program is to slowly start upgrading our equipment that's been older, outdated, not safe, not working. So that new equipment purchase is to replace one of our older jointers that was when the building opened. It's on its way out. It kind of stops working sometimes. We've been updating it as much as we can. And the new model that we chose is just a little bit safer for students to use. Any questions?
Thank you, Gregory. Thanks for the visual there. Looks like everyone's having fun.
Of course,
Hard.
they sure are, yeah.
Board questions, Joe.
I'd like to look specifically, excuse me, at the professional development line. I'm definitively in support of developing teachers in this category, but it's a pretty big number relative to the number of teachers that we're supporting. So I'd love to understand where this is in the life cycle of, are we building some capacity? Is this just an area that's expensive to do PD, but that, you know, these are now we're looking at yearly ongoing expenses. I just would like to understand sort of where this sits in the universe of how we keep this type of education, PD in this area of education up and running.
Mm-hmm. So I could talk about my increases there. So there's 2 increases on my end. The conference fees, which I'm realizing from this year, they used to be about $125. Now they've doubled or tripled that. They're about $250 just for conference fees. Those are in-state conferences as well. The increase to the $9,000, that's my end, includes some lodging and transportation, which is definitely increased for this year. And my goal is to get 2 teachers to go out and learn either at ISTE or for engineering conference and be able to bring some of these new things that we're learning nationwide or even worldwide back to our department and share those. So they could help run some of the professional development, share some of these new skills that they're learning because they haven't had the opportunity to do that in quite a while. There's a $20,000 that has been added for, so some robotics, I think. I don't know if those are field trips, Joan. Could you elaborate on the 20?
Sure. Why don't I just give a quick overview on the robotics so that it may answer some other questions as well. Just to catch everyone up, we're incredibly grateful to the Darien Foundation for their generous support of our robotics program as we've piloted this for the past 2 years across our district from K through 12. At the elementary level, our curriculum focus is on coding, and as students move from upper elementary into middle and high school, the focus becomes split between coding and engineering as students then begin to design and build robots to accomplish a variety of tasks. So in RC22 this year, we are asking for funding for that program, picking up from where the foundation grant leaves off for our district program. And that covers robots, parts, entry, competition fees, professional development and training, to make sure that all of our coaches and advisors are up to speed, transportation to competitions, such as we had to transport, I think it was 7 students to Walcott today. So we did that through district transportation. In our pilot year, last year, we had about 144 students. For the 22-23 school year, we have doubled that exposure to about 350 students. We've opened up the program for students to join on a quarterly basis through elementary and middle school, which has increased our numbers dramatically. We've also just recently purchased, in fact, I just unpacked them last week, robots to pilot integrating into our curriculum at the elementary level through both classrooms and through our libraries to enhance our STEM connections. This includes robots that are screenless coding for our youngest learners, so they can begin to have that experience of learning decomposition, of breaking big problems down into small bits, understanding logical sequence, understanding algorithms, pattern recognition. So we're pretty excited about that. Our goal, of course, is for students to learn how to think creatively to solve complex logical problems. The key for us is preparing our young learners to grow up computer science literate so that we reinforce computational thinking to help them think more logically and to articulate problems better. So any questions on the robotics funding?
Open up to board questions.
So
good,
just
good.
that, thank you for the overview. I appreciate it. And I'm sure there'll be questions about that, but just on the question that kicked that off. So in terms of the PD, is this basically, I think what I'm asking, is this a one-time increase because we're trying to build capacity, and or is professional development in this area increasing in cost and therefore we're going to see a higher run rate going forward? I just like, again, it's something I think we all value, but would just love to understand the cost of it this year
Sure.
and forward.
So it's a great question, Jill. So we have struggled, as Luke has mentioned, with staffing. And so I lost half of my advisors and so had to provide professional training for the new advisors. So we're anticipating we might have somewhat of that same struggle the next couple of years. So trying to build capacity. But as Greg mentioned, prices have gone up significantly, and in no other area do things change as rapidly as they do with technology education. So it requires us to continue to build capacity, but at the same time, yes, we've also seen increases in that training cost.
Are we getting any more value out of the increases in training costs, or is just a function of the game?
That's a great question. I believe that we are. So, for example, our 2 middle school advisors, Sue Shannon and Sarah Hathaway, went to the Carnegie Mellon, Carnegie Mellon University Nerd Camp for robotics. And they came back with tremendous skills, which they've shared with our other advisors in that first LEGO League, which is grade 4 through 8. And so we actually, based on their recommendation, brought that trainer in for our new advisors. And I think that it's added a level of sophistication and better implementation of coding into those clubs.
Thank you.
You good? Dennis?
Question on replacement equipment. So do we, I know we have the replacement, we have a technology replacement for electronic equipment. We have the replacement schedule for our maintenance equipment. Do we have a technology? Do we have a replacement for the STEM program? Because I'm a little concerned about students using, you know, a machine that's showing signs of wear. The replacement parts are scarce. I mean, I think, to me, I'd rather err on the side of caution and buy a machine that's replace a machine that's maybe a year or two before its time than a year or two after its time. And I think
Correct. Yeah.
And plus as well, I mean, I just bought a new table saw. It is light year. This is so much lighter, faster, easier to use, safer. It's amazing. And you know, I was like, how did I ever cut wood on this old table saw? So just a point.
So sure, for this year from last year's budget, we did that exactly. We had an older table saw that worked, but it just was a little bit too big and powerful, and that is safe for kids. So we just replaced that with a professional saw stop, which has the technology in it that stops if somebody actually gets in contact or touches it. And the last machine that I feel really needs to be replaced that came with the building is the jointer that we have. And that's the one that is sort of becoming a little bit more obsolete, harder to fix in parts. And that's factored in. It's about $4,000 to replace that. Where the button is and how the kids turn it on, it's just a better location. It just makes it safer and easier for them to use. So that's why I'm replacing that one. And in terms, realistically, of the larger machines, that's probably one of the last machines that needs to be replaced, big machines that are kind of on their way out.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So then it's a good question, Dennis. So then I think the conclusion is we're at a good place from having the right equipment from a safety standpoint. I would worry more about that than anything in terms of technology and all. Okay.
Of course.
Any other thoughts or questions? The only thing I would throw out, and maybe more, this is Chris and Dr. Adley. So I talk about equity and stuff like that. So a quick back of the napkin. So we've got $30,000 in professional development here. We've got 20,000 in field trips, which is about 50 grand. And I go through professional development for the high school, the Middlesex and the elementary schools, and it barely touches $20,000. So that doesn't work for me. So in terms of where we're spending our dollars and I think what our needs are. So I'm all for robotics and that type of stuff, but a $20,000 line item for field trips and a total of $19,345 for professional development between the high school, Middlesex, and all the elementary schools. Maybe I'm looking at it the wrong way and you'll educate me, but those numbers don't add up for me.
No, the only thing that I can say about it now is robotics is an expensive program to run. So when you have the first robotics, which launched today, it's an international launch. So all students across the country were able to get the task of here's the robot, here's the task, and what you have to do. It's an exciting day. But if you are going to be competitive, to register for those competitions is thousands of dollars at a pop once you actually have a competitive team. So you're a member of an organization and you're paying expensive registration fees
But that's where, so to that point, that's where I think all that information would have been good to have prior to the budget conversation. Because now I'm looking at a $50,000 cost associated with that. And I don't necessarily know all those details. All right. And I don't disagree with the approach or the program, but I've got all these teachers that are crying for more professional development, more help around mental health. It doesn't balance for me. So my 2 cents. Jill.
I think the other piece, and Joan certainly spoke to it, but it's complicated because it's a club. And again, while we fully support the notion, it just gets complex. So I think tying it explicitly to curriculum is also important where we can. I mean, and I think also helping us understand, we have student populations that are served in different ways, whether it's through you know, the cost per football player or that, sorry to throw them under the bus, but they're expensive. Or the cost, you know, other students that we may serve in more of a club-based model, but it would be helpful to understand who we're serving. And again, as I said, tying to the curriculum, which I know you will, but.
And I think that's a really good point, Jill. I think it goes back to my focus on what our priorities are and where we are with the dollars in this budget. And I just, you know, it's fine to walk before we run or before we race to the finish line. And we're in year 2, and I'm not sure we've, as a board, have had the right kind of update and insight into this that we need based on these dollars that are put on the table here. So that's where I'm coming from. John.
Is there a way that you could give us a variability in terms of, you know, the competition number, if you scaled it back, or, you know, what, you know, I guess what the unit number is and what the total dollar figure is. So this encompasses this many competitions, this, you know, and if we were to scale it back, what it would do to the activities.
Yes,
We
I
can certainly provide that. It's
Thank
not a problem. Something to keep in mind with the FIRST robotics program that I should have mentioned earlier is that we do want to ensure that we have these opportunities available to our students as they have the potential to award thousands of dollars in college scholarships that our students may not have had access to before. So we are also mindful of that opportunity.
Thank you.
Again, good data, but hearing about it during the budget cycle doesn't help me. Tara.
Could we also find out how many students are in it, just like we look at per cost per pupil for sports? Maybe we could look at it, you know, the same with the club.
Sure. As I indicated, we anticipate having about 350 students in the program this year, which is more than double last year's.
So this profession, this is looking at all grades. This is not just
Correct.
high school. Okay.
Actually, Duke, I have one more follow-up.
Sure,
Sorry.
go ahead, John.
Did we participate in these competitions when it was privately funded by the Darien Foundation?
This is our first year in the first competition. So we're really excited. The students that you saw in the background there, they have basically 6 weeks to build a fairly large robot that will compete different parts of the country and maybe someday will compete internationally. But prior to this, we were in VIX competitions, which is part of the high school curriculum.
So to that question and the earlier questions, I think Dennis about forecasting. So are these costs we're going to see on an ongoing basis around this program?
Around the high school program, yes. To the degree that our middle school students and upper elementary may compete, that is a far less expenditure. But as you get into middle and high school, it does increase rapidly.
So then I think as we get updates around robotics, we just need to make sure we're doing a better job on the forecasting front as to what this program continues to look like as it evolves. Sarah.
I just have going back to the enrollment question, how many kids are doing this is so there's, Mr. Darren said that there's 10 that we're competing today. Is that only, are those the only high school robotics members or are there, what's the split between elementary, middle, high?
Greg can better answer how many members are in our robotics club now, but it's only a portion of those students who were able to make the kickoff as it was on the Saturday. Greg?
Correct. Yeah, we have 10 students that came to the robotics event today, but on a normal club day, we're looking at somewhere between 30 to 40 students broken up into different teams. And we're competing in multiple events. FIRST robotics, and we competed in the Norwalk Havoc League. It's a BattleBots type of event that we did this year, and the kids are interested in doing all these events. So they're learning a great deal.
Okay, so and there's about the same approximate number at the middle school. There's say 40-ish at the middle school, and then the rest are at elementary.
No, we have about 24 to 30. I shouldn't say that. That's on a quarterly basis. So we have about 24 every quarter at the middle school.
Okay, I
And
just,
then
I
the
don't know how
rest-
you get to 350 from there, but okay.
Yeah, and then the rest are distributed across the elementary, which again, we've opened this up so that it's every quarter. We're getting a new influx of students, with the exception of Oxbridge that just started its program this week.
So I guess just for clarity, Joan, so is this a quarterly club or
Right.
I'm missing?
So at Henley Holmes,
elementary.
right, at the elementary level and at Middlesex, they are changing every quarter.
Okay,
We have some students who are in a practice competition league. So they're staying on through a good portion of the year. And we anticipate, we're trying to build capacity for the high school by developing those middle school students.
good. All right, Dave.
Just quick, in the 73400, $6,000, how many devices are we buying? And between 73400 and 24011, I mean, robots and robot parts sounds like stuff. iPad sounds like stuff. I'm just wondering what the distinction is between the two criteria and how things wind up in the various accounts.
Sure. So what we've discovered with the first Lego League, which is grades 4 through 8, is that we can use the Chromebooks, but what our students have struggled with is the Chromebooks have a tendency to lose the programs that they create. And it was especially observed at our intramural tournament that we had last May. So if we had a small handful of iPads at each one of those programs, that's 6 programs, 5 iPads for each pod, that would greatly help those students because the iPads have a tendency to hold on to the programs. And we piloted a couple of them at the middle school level, and they've worked really well. So in terms of the robot parts, it really depends on what the kind of competition is going to be at the high school level. So for example, today it was just announced, you don't know until the reveal what kind of robot you have to actually build. So all of those different parts are pieces of metal and different kinds of motors and sensors and pieces that the kids will be welding together to build this rather large robot.
So the iPad, $6,000, those iPads are for students, for teachers,
For students,
for students.
yes.
So how many iPads is that? 6,000,
That is 6 times 5, 30 iPads.
35 iPads. So we do
30.
not have 35 iPads to repurchase? To repurpose?
We do not. We have the iPads at the high school are needed for testing. So we're not at a point where we can get those iPads. So we think that it would be better to have them on hand the whole time so that the students would be able to continue their programming, not lose those programs, and be able to function at the best efficiency.
You know, we're not at the Ed Cut night, but I would suggest you all figure out how to repurpose or use existing iPads. I'm not into buying another $6,000 worth of iPads for this program. With all that we've invested in technology, all we've just invested in the rollout of technology for teachers and department chairs, I think you can find the iPads that you need for this program.
Well, on that, we just had parents purchase technology for their students for
Yeah.
academics. So to purchase iPads for this club, see, I think we'd hear a lot of
Yeah.
feedback on that one.
Good. Any other questions or comments? Thank you. We'll go to RTM Education.
Hi, just one comment from someone, college engineering programs are very competitive to get into. They're looking for students who have a lot of experience in high school. This club would be helpful. Can robotics partner with private organizations, companies for funding? And again, this may be you will address it with policy, but given there are sports teams that fundraise, I don't know, is there some policy that directs a certain amount of funding per club? But thank you.
Good. Thanks, Ed. Jack.
The easy part is I agree with you on the iPads. Can we provide a reconciliation from the Darien Foundation grant from fiscal year 21, 22 to 23? So we can track what expenses were in 21 and 22 that are now moving into this budget in 23, and what are new expenses associated. So that I would consider, in my two terms, core versus growth. That would be the core programs of what we've carried through from the prior 2 years. And this is really growth. What are the incremental parts of what's there? And, you know, I'm pretty good at math, but I'm having a little problem breaking down to the 350. So can you provide the 350 broken down by schools and programs? Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. CDSP?
So building a little bit on what Jack just said, are these budgeted costs for robotics consistent with what was spent last year and the prior year when funded by the grant? Can we get a breakdown of the costs by building, i.e. elementary, MMS, and DHS? Has there been any discussion about elevating robotics to a course at DHS and possibly MMS and remaining at a club at the elementary level? Are these instructors leaving just robotics but still teaching here, or are they leaving the district and their robotics skills go with them? Have you thought about charging students or fundraising to cover some of the costs?
Thanks, Deb. CPAC.
Hi, we have no questions, but we'd just like to thank you for and support the robotics clubs, especially at the elementary school where there are very few alternatives to students. The only other is the extracurricular intramural program. So we very much support this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Public comment on RC 22. Anyone online, Chris? Very good. All right, so some follow-up to do there. So thank you both. Thanks for joining us.
Greg, thank you for giving your time on Saturday. Thank you very much, and congratulations to the kids.
Of course, thank you.
We'll move on to RC 15 technology. Excuse me, Jeff Adams. Hey, Jeff.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. So I'm here to present the budget for RC 15 technology. This budget center focuses on the computing infrastructure of the district, covering costs such as hardware, software, labor, and training. The total increase for RC 15 this year is a fiscally responsible 1.89%. There are two software initiatives we are exploring this year. The first is a change from School Cash Online to My School Bucks. School Cash Online is the fund collecting software that is utilized by a number of different entities within the district. This software is simply not supported anymore and will be replaced by My School Bucks. The second initiative is exploratory. We are looking at a possible migration from Aspen to PowerSchool for our student information system. And again, the change is only being explored in the coming year. Both these changes have little to no impact on the budget, but we just wanted to highlight it for the coming year. The actual focus for this year's budget is hardware refreshment. If you look at account 123021 on page 171, you can see the listing of the hardware that we are looking to replace. Each of these devices are anywhere from 5 to 12 years old and are on the schedule to be replaced. I'm happy to answer any questions about the budget.
All right, Jill.
Jeff, can you talk about overall your support model and how it's working, given that we're now at BYOB? We, for many years, struggled with having enough, well, particularly when we hit COVID, with having enough support in the back office. And then at that time, I think you hired one and we ended up not being able to hire a second, but went out to a consultant. Is that still where we are? Is that still working? And particularly in light of just where we are today, plus with BYOB? No, BYOD.
Everyone perked up when you said BYOB.
Yes, we are extremely happy with the staffing we have. We are very efficient. We have redundancy at all 3 school levels. We have 2 technicians for the elementary, 2 at the middle school, 2 at the high school. So any and all issues are responded to within, within minutes instead of hours or days now. And we have an incredible, again, redundancy within the staff.
Thank you.
Rich, just real quick, or Rich or Jeff, the cash online and moving to that new platform. I've had a couple of parents complain about the transaction fees, especially amongst multiple kids.
Yep.
That's not a revenue thing for us. That's just covering the services. It's like merchant services.
Correct.
We're paying the cost. We're not making money off.
No, so it
off of our
covers
students.
It covers just the credit card fees that
Right.
get processed. Speaking of that, that's one of the primary reasons we're looking to move from School Cash Online to My School Bucks. School Cash Online will not support a 3% model anymore, which is what we currently charge. If we are to stay with My School Bucks, it would be a 4% servicing fee plus a 50-cent per transaction fee. So the 4% would cover credit card fees. The 50 cents per transaction fee is essentially a profit to My School Bucks. Or not My School Bucks, excuse me, School Cash Online. So one of the reasons we're recommending to make that change to My School Bucks is so that we can stay with the 3%, which covers the merchant service fees.
So the 3% covers the contract for the process.
Correct.
Okay. All right. So other than that, it's a break. We're.
Correct.
Okay. Dennis.
So the two vendors are basically the same, other than their fees, or is there a downside to My School Bucks versus?
So in School Cash Online, you create what's called like a catalog item, and then you post the catalog item, and the parents can either choose to purchase it or not. My School Bucks, it's a store. You create a store, so it works relatively the same. The one nice thing about My School Bucks, it is the platform we use for school lunch. So the parent, when they log into My School Bucks, they would see their student's lunch account. They would see any stores that were created for whatever items that were appropriate for their student.
Katie.
Thank you. I just wanted to say first that I appreciate the efficiencies that are evident based on transitioning and streamlining some things, and also the consideration to our broader community use from consolidating the payment process. And I wanted to ask about the potential switch from Aspen. This was fantastic to sort of see this possible layout plan in advance of what it might look like in terms of a timeline, what it might look like in costs. I felt like this snapshot gave you a quick understanding. So thank you for that. One question was the $75,000 fee to purchase Power School. Is that an annual fee?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So I guess it's probably me. So Rich, are you guys recommending we move to this new platform this year?
No, for next school year,
The payment platform?
for My School Bucks.
Yeah, for My School Bucks.
Yes, so for the next school year.
For the next school.
So
year.
starting in August of
All right,
2023.
So there's no cost associated. Are there any costs associated with that changeover?
No.
No. Okay. So then moving to what Katie brought up, it's good to see this kind of high level, build out of a straw man of moving away from Aspen. I think to Katie's point, we'd need to like to see a forecast and stuff like that. So is this $9,000? Are you asking for that this year to start that feasibility study?
Yes, so the idea
Okay.
would be for that 9,000 to send certain staff members to what's called Power School University. And it's an opportunity to kind of see Power School kind of up close.
Where is that $9,000?
It's in professional development in RC 19.
Okay. All right. Good, Dave. Or, okay, you guys shoot it out.
Go ahead.
I have to say that I saw this sort of schedule in here and it actually raised more questions for me than fewer. I don't understand what our process is. Is this our normal process that we go to when we do an acquisition of new software? What is the review? What steps do we take? What efficiencies do we try and identify? How do we make an evaluation between a new system and an old system? That kind of flows through when I look at the $1 million we're spent, we're almost $1 million on software across the board. Are there efficiencies that can be saved from either merging different software systems together or not? As an example, I see that we have software in here which looks for plagiarism. And I can see where that would be useful for teachers and freeing up their free time. But, for instance, I don't see anything that would, say like a grade scope that would automatically facilitate grading and free up teachers' time. So I think there's one, what's our actual process for systems acquisition? What do we go through and how do we do that and identify efficiencies as we go through the process for onboarding? And then second, what are the secondary effects and where do we free up time and efficiencies for teacher, staff, other administrators for the systems and softwares we bring into the system? So I don't know how any of that works. And again, unfortunately, this is another issue or another item where we have a budget with budget implications, but we haven't had a policy or substantive explanation as to what this is or what the goals are, objectives. Further, I just highlight on the new computer equipment in 1230.21. Same issue here. I see we have a replacement cycle. That's great, but given the correspondence we received regarding the last implementation, which was done up at the high school, the desktops given out to the teachers, like I'd love to hear a postmortem on that, why that went wrong, what lessons were learned, and how we're going to move forward in a more intelligent, more efficient process and make sure that our implementations and rollout are done more successfully than apparently the last one was. But again, that's just one correspondence, one letter, email that I base that on. I just don't have the information here as to what's going on and would have appreciated that before the budget conversation.
So thanks, Dave. Yeah, so I think what I'd want to understand is what do you need this year to start that process? And if it's the $9,000 for the feasibility study, but then I think to Dave's point, and my understanding is we're one of the last or the only school district left on Aspen. So this is something we need to do. And from my conversations with folks, it'll really take us to the next level in terms of whatever you want to call it, a program or the school system. But I guess to Dave's point is understanding the vendor review process. And you may say there's only one vendor out there other than Aspen. So that answers that question. But then I think we still want to understand the whole.
So I think for the feasibility study, in addition to sending people to Power School University, it's to create essentially a committee to decide, is Power School better than Aspen?
Okay.
Or should we stay with Aspen? What are the benefits of Power School versus Aspen and vice versa? And then make the decision, should we change? And then if you do change, that's when the implementation costs come in.
Right.
That's when you carry the software. And it's a pretty gargantuan task to change for student management system. It's probably the only system you have that touches everybody,
Right.
employees, parents, students, the whole 9 yards. So it would take a significant amount of time. In Fairfield County, it's us and Greenwich that are on Aspen still. And then there are some districts, north of Fairfield County that are still on Aspen. Predominantly, though, Power School is used throughout Fairfield County.
But to Dave's point, are there any other vendors out there or is that really it?
It's primarily Aspen and
Power School. Okay. I mean, I heard anecdotally, like, the new system, I mean, gets you down to the point of the cafeteria being able to see allergies based on the student's ID and purchasing food. I mean,
So there's a lot of links between Power School and other software programs. So like Power School will link with Mosaic, which is the point of sale system. It links with like Snap and other things. There are links to Aspen that we still have, but it doesn't link with as many systems, I would say, as Power School does.
go ahead, Jill.
I just want to broaden that question because I just heard you say, I mean, I could guess why we're looking at Aspen, but I'd like to hear from your lips. So I hear it's got greater integration capability with other systems. What are the other reasons that we're looking at Aspen?
Or
What are the
Power School.
or evaluating our student information system? I know, but
So let's, in the interest of time, I think what the big question is, there's a current need for dollars to start a feasibility study. So I think the board would like to see the start of, what you need, what that whole $9,000 looks like, what it's going to get us. To me, this is a project. Do we have the resources to implement this? Are you going to have to bring a consultant on board? All the things that go with implementing a new product or a new process. I think I'd like to, you need $9,000 for what? We're looking at replacing Aspen with what, why, how, and what the feasibility study is going to get us. And I think this is a good timetable, but also to Katie's initial question, let's do a better job of what are the costs going out 3, 4, or 5 years? What are the potential savings going out 3 or 5 years? So is that good for the board? Okay, good. Sarah?
Thank you. Can I move on to the equipment budget? I'm just curious about, it says elementary office desktops and there's 75 of them. Are those just the desktops in the classrooms? What is that? How are there 75 office desktops?
So that's over across 5 schools, so 25 per school. And that's anything from administration to health to custodial to security to the gym.
None of those people have laptops.
Pardon me?
None of those people use laptops. They only use desktops. Okay.
Correct. Mhm.
And the question about the middle school teacher laptops, kind of building on what Dave said, we've heard anecdotally and from via an email that the rollout at the high school with the teacher laptops was not ideal. Have middle school teachers been asked what they need, what they want, and is there thought about how to do that a little more seamlessly?
Well, all of our rollouts for the past 10 years have been very successful, and this would be slow and methodical for this rollout. And we would be staying with the same technology that they have currently. So there'd be really no change. It would just be a much better.
Technology is just an upgraded device.
I'm sorry?
No change in technology, it's an upgraded device.
Correct. Mhm.
Any other questions or thoughts? Yeah, Julie.
Thank you. And back to the software, who vets all of the software that's listed here? Like, how does this list come together? Who's choosing these or opting into this?
Depends on the type of software. So if you look at the operational, that's basically on our end. That's all your back end operating systems, all your cybersecurity, phone systems, basic data security. That's all on our back end. Administrative has to do with exactly that. People who from the student management system, the finance system, et cetera, et cetera. And those departments or users tend to choose that. Then if you look at instructional, that comes out of the curriculum side.
So Julie, we review every piece of software, whether it's old and needs to be taken off a list or whether it's new and needs to be added to it.
Okay.
I guess my follow-up would be, I honestly would need to hear from or see some more information about the middle school and the rollout of 100 laptops up there. I don't, the rollout of the computer equipment at the high school was not executed well from what I've heard and what I've seen. So, I mean, this is another big number. I mean, my immediate question is what's the impact if we do none of this year? Jeff?
Well, they'll be working with laptops that are not supported. They're not under warranty anymore, much slower processors. And
so as of this year, they fall off of warranty or they're already off of warranty?
they're actually already off warranty.
They're already off of warranty.
Correct.
So then that falls into your shop to fix and repair.
Exactly.
Okay. I'm not 100% on board with the rollout of these based on the feedback I got from a high school standpoint. So,
But again, keep in mind that the rollout at the high school was different technology. This is like for like technology and has been very successful over the past 10 years. We have never had an issue like we saw last year.
so you're just replacing existing technology where the high school was some newer and different technology.
Correct.
Dave?
Yeah, I think we need more information as a board. And I guess the question I would pose after hearing that, Jeff, is why did we change it up for the high school if we're just going to replace in kind with newer models here? So what was the decision that led to that? So there's just questions all around this, which again, would prefer to have had more info reported.
Sorry, Dave, I didn't catch the first part of the question, sorry.
So I guess Jeff's commented that we do in-kind replacements with newer models.
Yes.
That's gone very well.
Yes.
But at the high school, we made a decision to replace the technology.
Yes.
So why did we make that change instead of it in kind, which seems to have been successful? So just the gating question is why we made that change.
Yeah, we can provide that. That was.
And I guess there's to that point, there's no real new technology change that anyone's recommending at the middle school here or the elementary schools. We're just switching out old for new. I guess, and you know, the other piece of this, just not for further discussion, but it's another $750,000 in technology. And I'm still missing the connection of all this technology to curriculum, to what a day in the life looks like at a student's desk, to the money we still spend on consumables and books. It's still, the dots are still not connecting for me. So, and I know you'll have some conversation around that down the road. Anything else? Good. RTM, education, Ed with education.
Similar to maybe the question you have when we talk about $750,000, and we seem to be on autopilot for the replacement cycle. It is what it is. So we're buying new items. You know, I think it would be worth looking at maybe stretching that cycle out, because that would save a certain amount of money. And I certainly recognize that you have issues with support. I'm personally using an Apple computer that's 10 years old. So
Thanks, Ed. Jack.
A couple quick questions first, Jeff. It's nice to see you again. Can we have a list of programs that were in last year's budget that aren't in this year's budget? So that if you're looking to improve something, at least we can see what some of the offset is on the items itself. Can we also have an analysis, and Rich, maybe this from your area? Last year, we had a technology budget where we had a quantity and we had an estimated cost. Can we have a reconciliation from last year's budget of how many we actually did buy and what the actual cost was, so we can compare what we had budgeted versus what we actually spent? Second, this was a comment that I made last year, and I know it may only be minor, but if we're replacing the same technology for nurses and administrative and other people, you know, I'm not sure they all need the same technology or the same level of speed and the same level of memory. And I don't know if there's a cost differential, so that if we could truly understand what they need versus what we're buying them, are we giving them more than what they actually need? And therefore, can we reduce costs there? Here's the other thing where we were talking about before, capital versus operating, and a suggestion. I know this isn't a cut session, but just a concept. If in fact you finally whittle down to what you want to spend out of the 750,000, and because from F&B's perspective, we don't like excess in budget. One of the things is that if you have 400,000 in addition, you know, by the end of the year, actually doing a pre-buy on some of this stuff this year, and then reducing that, I'm just going to use numbers, but let's say it's 400,000. Pre-buy the stuff this year, so it's coming out of your operations and not going into the general fund, and then reducing the budget by the equivalent amount is much appreciated by the F&B committee, because we can then spend it on operations, not on capital. So that's just a thought concept for going forward.
Thanks, Jack. CDSP.
Sarah Gortel, CDSP. A couple of software questions. The first is, so when do you expect to be able to cancel the IEP Direct program now that CT SEDS is live? For Zoom, so we have 25,000 in there listed as a distance learning system. Since there's no more distance learning, is there a smaller plan or license that would still allow Zoom usage occasionally, but not as expansive because we don't need it? Lastly, for Code Monkey, got 10,815 in there. Is this to cover the entire program? PTOs have been asked to chip in the past.
Thank you. CPAC.
No questions.
Thank you. Any questions, public comment on technology RC 15?
Hi, Trina O'Connor, 15 Highland Avenue. This is just a preemptive support. But I have two older students who went to another school and used Power School. So I'm a parent user for 6 years. It's a great program. So I was Aspen in Power School and I loved Power School. So I think parents and teachers will find that there are so many efficiencies will free up a lot of time, and it really does increase the communication lines between parents, students, and families. So I just want to put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone online, Chris?
Taylor Carter.
Great. Taylor?
Hey, sorry, I know we're going to submit everything in writing, but I just
All right.
wanted to follow up on Jack's comment. And if we're going to have a conversation about pre-buys, obviously Board of Finance would love to be a partner in that conversation.
Thank you, Taylor. All right, Jeff, thank you for being with us this afternoon. Always appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
We will move on to RC 26 ELP Early Learning Program. Laura Straighten. Good morning. Good afternoon, Laura. How are you?
Hello, everyone.
Who do I see on the phone there also? Kirsten? How are you?
Hi, good. How are you?
Good.
So,
Turn
if
it
you'd
over
like,
to you guys.
so, good afternoon. I'll do the proposal for the early learning program, budget. So, good afternoon, everyone, Board of Education members and community. I'm Laura Straighten, Program Director of the Early Learning Program. I'm very excited to see our dream of one site, one location realized for the opening of the 2023-24 school year. All of our 9 classrooms will be located at the Axe Ridge site. Thank you for
Could you
supporting.
just close to the microphone, and if you could speak a little louder, thank you.
Okay. So you heard the part about I'm excited about the preschool opening at Axe Ridge. Great, great. The budget highlights for the 23-24 school year. ELP over the last year transferred some funds from textbooks and consumables to support our general teaching supplies. The account 024011 general teaching supplies, you'll see this reflected in the new budget proposal. An increase of $500 is to continue to address teaching materials for the preschool. Professional development account 25003, an increase of $3,000 is to address the mandates by the state of Connecticut's individual education plan changes. CT SEDS requires standard-based goals and objectives to be written into the IEP. I'd like to work with Connecticut Cooperative Educational Services to help us work on that for next school year. In addition to this, continued professional development to support our work with Literacy How and Margie Gillis around early literacy skills and assessments of young children. This work began in 2019 from a grant from the Office of Early Childhood. Tuition account 1430, I think. There's a 4% increase. Currently, this school's tuition is $7,300, an increase to $7,630. This is in line with our community preschools increases. I'd also like to support the proposal discussed earlier in the elementary budget of Ox Ridge of increasing the 11th-month secretary to a 12-month secretary to support the needs of the early learning program at the Ox Ridge site year-round. This was something that was implemented over the years and was successful in supporting the early learning program. That secretary has now retired and was replaced by a 10-month secretary. So as always, I thank you for your continued support in the early learning program.
Thank you. I'm sure it will be exciting. It's fun to see the ELP wing already built, although it's a quasi cafeteria gymnasium on top of everything else, but it'll be an exciting move in consolidation for you. And I think even a better way to deliver those services to a great group of students and a great group of folks that support that program. So thank you. Board questions on RC 26 ELP. Jill.
Hi, Laura. I wanted to talk a little bit about professional development. We're seeing a couple of categories where professional development is up a bit. And again, everything you have listed here, I certainly support, but I'd love to understand if these are more, we have a couple of years of extended PD because we're trying to build some capacity, or if this is the rate at which we are starting to see PD necessary in this type of population. I know the ELP population is complex and that complexity is a wonderful thing, but just would love to understand what you kind of see as the PD needs over a period of time?
So, EOP is both the integrated preschool program, so it is a gentle balance with supporting all children. So last year and the year before's model was that coaching, taking the information that we've gathered and really putting it into practice. And the classroom teachers have really benefited from that coaching model through Literacy How. So it's taking that information that we do have and putting it into practice. And with each year and each classroom design, there are little tweaks. So, and new research coming out. So it's really that carried over implementation of those skills. We've been consistent with our teaching staff. So that's been nice. We haven't had to onboard or retrain folks in that. So it's really taking what they know and then bringing it forward. And I would just say for the state mandates for the new ways to write IEP goals and objectives, it's just really fine tuning what we have and taking that information. It breaks down to like 2 sessions with CES. So that's around the professional development. Did I answer it completely for you?
Yes, and then I understand, thank you, a little bit better what's written there. And I think it may be a moving target, so it's probably hard to answer a little bit, but are you thinking that, my question is, are you thinking of that we're looking at a higher PD cost kind of over time, again, noting that in a couple areas we see PD needs increasing, or is this a sort of a point in time where we're trying to finish an implementation, plus we have the new standards of the state and it's kind of all coalescing and we might see it pull back a little bit?
Like moving forward with the following school year with support on literacy. I mean, at some point, I guess we'll have what we need and our needs will change as we learn and grow. But this is, kind of the focus right now is really honing in on this. And those assessments of early learners and really being able to turnkey that information to the community preschools has been very helpful. With really talking about what's developmentally appropriate in early learning. Sometimes expectations are higher, or how do we address certain things? So taking, the teachers are really benefiting from that hands-on. And, the next step is really also taking that information that we have and sharing it out into the community and the community preschool so that they have this good information too.
Thank you.
80.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask if we might see a breakdown of the professional development costs. I would be curious to know how much is being spent in what direction, as well as I think it would be helpful when we are bringing in specific consultants with specific goals to kind of understand what a timeline might be in terms of the work of them training and implementing our teachers.
So just in general, like last year we had it through the 10 months of school. And this year, because of the onboarding of the CT SEDS, we really have taken the first half of the school year really to craft our skills with that CT SEDS, and our growing pains with that. So the next half of the semester of the school year will be really focused on working with the Literacy How around that. So I guess we can give that information to you as well.
Thank you, Sarah.
Building off of that, is there, is Dr. Gillis here ad infinitum? Is there an end time for her? And I'm also curious if there's been discussion about, and Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, she has not worked with our K1, K-2 literacy curriculum at all. And I know she's very involved at the state level of that. So is there an interest to have her do K2 as well, or is she just solely ELB?
So I can talk a little bit. It isn't, so the first year we had Dr. Margie Gillis come in and do the hands-on training about early literacy and dyslexia and how it relates to young children. Since that period of time, we've been working with her colleagues at Literacy How, so it's not necessarily Dr. Margie Gillis per se. It's under her guidance and her company. With regards to K2, that's more of a conversation that we, for elementary. But right now, we've just been focusing around this with the preschool.
I'm just curious if K2 could learn anything from what she's done at ELP.
We certainly share the information that we gain and all that, but direct professional development, again, I'll leave that for Kristen and Shirley to discuss and their focus.
Good. Shirley, anything you want to add? Sure.
I just want to, I'm getting a new mic, right? So
It's not in the
you
budget.
hear that? I'm getting a new mic. I apologize for it. So Laura began with a grant that she wrote. If you recall, she wrote this grant 3 years ago, and it was a grant that was really looking at early markers or really looking at the acquisition, because of course, we're looking at language development. We're not reading in preschool, and looking at pre-reading markers. So when, and I think year 1, as Laura said, was Dr. Gillis, and then many of her colleagues have subsequently been supporting the coaching model. A lot of it is teaching the teachers what to look for. A lot of it is really understanding what language and linguistic ability looks like. And Laura can speak more to it about sound and looking at sound and sounds of different letters and different objects. I think to see if there's a nexus between the early learning program and K1-2, I think this is about early literacy, pre-reading. So the markers really are talking about what we're looking for. I don't see the nexus directly with K1-2. I do think where we are aligned is, and I know we spoke about it when Chris and Julie really did their presentation, looking at the science of reading, is I think the alignment is really looking at what are we looking for in learners in terms of their literacy and their ability to do that? What are we looking at pre-reading skills, which is our ELP program, and then preparing them for when they do get to kindergarten. The different programs we have now that we're doing, including Haggerty, including Wilson, including Foundations and the other programs that are available.
Thank you, Shirley. Sure.
Just another different request. I believe last year you broke out preschool, the tuition by preschool in town. I would love to be able to see that again, just so we can compare where we are to each school and see where we fall.
ELP standpoint.
I'll send that to Rich. Yep.
Good. Thank you. Jill.
And I'm sorry, also, if I can,
Yes.
just to Katie's question before, to Laura, also, we certainly can show the breakout to the board of the expenditures for PD of how much.
Good. Jill.
Just building on that answer about the transition to K1-2, we do have some students though who enter K1-2 who are still working on that kind of pre-elementary or not preschool type of skill set. Are we work with the special ed teachers who may be, are we making that, I don't know why I can't speak. Are we
Nexus,
making that
yes.
nexus happen? Thank
We
you.
are.
Okay.
That's, I think Kristen's present there for that reason also, to show that there's a nexus between the ELP program and early literacy as they enter kindergarten. And you're right, many of our students really require a high level of discrete instruction when they're entering kindergarten.
Yeah, thank you.
Julie.
As you prepare for the exciting consolidation at the new Oxbridge facility next year, are you doing anything differently or thinking about anything different to make sure that the community members are aware of this? Parents of 2-year-olds don't necessarily know what's going on with the elementary schools. So is there anything different that you're doing to prep for that?
So in the welcome letter, at the very beginning of the school year, for those joining us in their 3s, we did mention that in the welcome letter. And then also we are working on, we'll call it the in quotes, application deadline was Friday. And in my review and my open house, we discussed a lot of that, information that we're going to be all housed at Oxbridge Elementary School. I did a Zoom and also in person at that site. And then when, I notified families yesterday of their acceptance into the program, I also did mention again that it would be all housed at Oxbridge Elementary School. On the website, it also shares that we will be at one site next school year. So those are the steps that I've taken in conversations with families moving through birth of 3. I have those intimate conversations with them around programming, and that process, and that we will be at Oxbridge next school year. So we do have.
I think, Julie, that's a kind of a great question. And I think we could have some with your role in the communications committee, I think it would be worthwhile taking that offline. And having at the board level an update about ELP, the consolidation, the move, the communications, and work with our partners in CDSP and the PTOs. And I think it would be a good test of what we're doing from a communication standpoint, because it's a big move and it's a lot of
It's
information.
exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's exciting.
It's important information, but it's also exciting.
Yep.
And we should make
Great.
hay.
Absolutely. Good stuff. Dennis.
Yeah, with kind of on that point, and maybe I was making an assumption, and we all know what happens when you assume, but I assumed when we would consolidate into one center that we would see some savings somewhere. And maybe I'm viewing savings as only cost savings, and there's also time savings. And maybe what will be helpful to me is to understand what savings we've achieved and whether that's the ability for teachers at Royal and Tokenique to do more. But I don't see that in my budget book. So I would appreciate a little more color.
So the savings, so currently we have speech and language pathologists at 3 different locations.
So Laura, I'm gonna, in the interest of time, and I think it's kind of a combo Laura, Rich question. But in the interest of time, if it's all right with you, Dennis, we'll take that as a question for follow-up because it's a good question. Thank you. Jill.
One more question. Given that we do have now communicated with families who have applied, I just was curious to know if the tuition number in the book is consistent with what we're expecting for the coming year.
It is, as long as the board approves it.
Okay. Thank you.
Laura, you can thank Rich for that answer.
Yeah, I was just gonna pitch it to him anyway.
Yeah, good.
Thank you.
I think we'll circle back and Sarah, Jill and I will talk about an agenda item around ELP consolidation. And Rich, I think that's a good takeaway. I think there's more of a savings from travel, time and energy for our people all being in one building and scattered all over the place. But we'll see if there's any financial numbers around it. Any other board questions or comments? ELP, Ed, from an education standpoint, you're good. Jack, come on up.
Hi, Laura, always good to see you.
Good to see you.
Just to validate that I can read the projections properly in the first part of the book, you currently have 94 students in the program and you're going to 108?
That 94 will be towards the end of the school year.
Understood how that works.
Yep.
Okay, that's number one. Number two, I had the same question as Dennis, but I might reclassify it not as savings, but as efficiencies that you might get. Although I like dollars as well. And the other thing that goes along with that is because you have everybody in one location, and I see that the subs that you have in the building currently, it looks no year-to-date spend, except, and yet we're increasing it next year. And I kind of thought that if somebody's out because everybody's in one place, maybe the mixing and matching might appropriate. So at the same time you're discussing EOP at a later date, we can discuss that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jack. CDSP.
Sarah Gortel, CDSP. First question is around tuition. It sounds like the rate of increase is consistent with town. I think the overall tuition, I'm interested in, this might be the question that you asked, just looking for a 4-day-a-week, 9 to 1. And we may be keeping it intentionally a lot lower, but that does sound low. Let's see. The other one is, will the program receive new equipment furniture with the relocation to Oxbridge? 1,000 is the same as the current fiscal year, just is more needed.
So just to put one away real quickly, everything at Oxbridge is brand spanking new.
Including the ELP.
Everything is brand spanking new. CPAC.
Hi, Trisha Bresnahan for CPAC. We were just curious if we could find a breakdown of expenses that ELP expenses that are in the RC24 budget, and also for the professional development, if breakdown sort of the way other people are already asking for that, and then also to say that we support Margie Gillis and we think that she would, if you were to use having her, she would be a great resource for K1, 2 also. Thanks.
Thanks, Tricia. Public comments on RC 26 ELP. Anyone online, Chris?
No.
All right, good. Thank you all for the conversation around that. We will move quickly to RC 24 Special Education, Shirley Klein.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Members of the Board of Education, thank you for your continued support for our exemplary special education programs and your ongoing acknowledgement of the laudable work of our special education and general education teachers, our psychologists, our speech and language pathologists, our occupational therapists, our physical therapists, our paraprofessionals, program directors, chairpersons, assistant principals, and principals. In our recent special education and student services program overview, we presented our continuum of services in our programs ELP through 12+, program highlights, student data enrollment, professional development, and recruitment challenges. Our proposed RC 24 budget reflects continued implementation of our continuum of services and the required level of staffing and resources to support the individual needs of our students in grades ELP through 12+. I can start with the first item. We're asking, as you know, we had our school psychologist at Darien High School was in our grant last year. Dennis spoke earlier about some of the items that are in our current budget that were grant proposed and supported last year. Our school psychologist is one of them. The grant, of course, will expire in fiscal year 23. You know, I can't tell you in understating it of the difference having the additional psychologist has made in the high school. Not only in the protocol that we have, that there is now a psychologist for each grade that can really loop and follow with the grades, the way we do in our middle school as well. And of course, in our elementary, we have 2 psychologists there and can loop with their students. But given the need of the mental health support that our students need and our staff needs and our colleagues need, I think the difference that it's made not only for dealing with student distress, dealing with supporting colleagues and administration, but also in supporting families. And I think that's an essential piece. And again, I can't understate or state enough. The continuation of that 4th psychologist is essential for supporting our students and families at Darien High School. So we're asking for a FTE of 1.0. The next one is the SLP at DHS, and currently also that was in our IDEA ARP grant for this current school year. The numbers I presented last year, if you recall, we were up to 79 students. As you could see, we started with 81 students this year. You can imagine the difference that that has made in terms of supporting students at Darien High School. Also, when you see later on in our specialized program, the increased number of students in our Excel program also has warranted support from speech and language pathologists as well. So it's not only within our supplemental programs in grades 9 through 12, it's also in our specialized programs. So we're asking that speech and language pathologists that were supported by the grant move into the budget for 23-24. The special education teacher at DHS, and the narrative is in your book, so I'll just speak to the essential pieces. Proudly, our Excel program has really expanded. Currently, actually, when I wrote this, there were 11 students, there's actually 12 students, depending on where we are during the day, that are really provided specialized programs in our Excel program. We have an extraordinary teacher, Brittany Hassick, who has been able to support that with several outstanding paraprofessionals. And yet, as our students move throughout the building into their other programs, other classes, we realize we need a higher level of support to be able to support our students in our specialized program, as well as increased need for direct reading. We found as well that we've got direct reading instruction that's required also. So we're asking for one essential special education teacher to support both the Excel program and additional sections for direct reading for the 2023-24 school year. To give you an idea, a few years ago, we had 5 or 6 students in Excel. We went up to 8 and we're now at 12. I also want to just let the board know that we're expecting probably 2 more students who will be coming to our Excel program next year, which will bring us to 14 students. So we're requesting staffing for a special education teacher as well. I'll go over to the Oxford.
Excuse me, Shirley, Rich, are you someone moving this?
Oh.
Just for those folks that don't have it on front of them.
Sorry, I'm on page 215.
Thank you.
I'd like to move over to Oxbridge. And again, how we take pride in what I know that our programs, our specialized programs, remember several years ago, we started with 3 students. We now have, as of when I wrote this, we have 21 students in our DLC program, which is an extraordinary opportunity of students that can stay in our district and stay in their community school and can have the opportunity to be educated where they live. This year, and I think Luke did mention it earlier on, once we consolidate programs, we still have 1 DLC program at Henley. Those students will be aging out to middle school next year. So all of our students will be at DLC. We anticipate, based on Laura's program and our ELP students who will be aging out, that we'll probably have 26 students possibly in our DLC program. The reason that we're asking for an additional teacher and additional speech pathologist is to, 1, address the needs of 26 young learners in our DLC program, and 2, just to inform the board and the community that our early learning programs in our DLC are really language-based programs. Language is a very strong piece of it. We have a multidisciplinary model. Our speech and language pathologists can push into the program, that can work alongside the special education teacher and the other related service providers. And in order to properly address the needs of 26 young learners, we need to ask for an additional special education teacher and a speech and language pathologist. In the narrative, we speak of the scope of that speech and language pathologist. It ranges from prompt therapy to feeding and swallowing to social skills groups. So an essential piece of really working with the number of students we're anticipating would require an additional speech and language pathologist.
Shirley, you're still on board, and we had a lot of conversation about it. I think it's exciting too, but the whole consolidation of DLC into Oxford also is from an efficiency and a delivery standpoint, it will.
And a community. I think Luke did mention that. It's a very different community when you have, first of all, your general education teachers are all working together in terms of offering up opportunities for our students to be included in the classrooms. You have a robust related service providers, not to mention some of the most extraordinary, if you've seen it on your visit, PT/OT room. I mean, you have a facility that supports the depth and breadth of this program. So it has been very efficient.
Thanks.
The paraprofessionals, again, I'm talking about when we mentioned earlier, we've got our aging out students from ELP program. We anticipate 2 paraprofessionals over at Holmes and 4 over at Oxbridge, depending again on PPT decisions and what works. You probably would ask the question of, why, what happens at ELP when students move up? So understanding that your ELP class size is half the size of your class when you get to kindergarten. So you might have as few as 8 or 9 or maybe 10 students in your ELP program. You have 1 teacher and you have a para or a para and a half. So students can be supported in a different level prior to going into a classroom or a specialized program when they articulate to kindergarten. So we can't move our paras from ELP into our kindergarten programs. They need to be there for incoming students in ELP, as well as making sure that we support our students when they go into kindergarten. So we know that we will need 4 at Oxbridge and I believe 2 at Holmes at the time that I wrote this. But as Laura said earlier, things change as kids age into ELP from now till June. So there may be different opportunities also. I'm on page 216. Thanks, Chris. I think this was spoken to before, substitute teachers. I don't know that I have to speak to it again. Are we okay?
Next topic.
Okay, great. For ESY and summer PPTs, if you add the numbers together, I wrote, if you look at the difference between the decrease is based on the number of days that will happen in 2024. Remember, we're writing from July 1, 2023 to June 2024. So we have a reduction of a day. And we have collective bargaining contract increases. And if you look at the delta between the one less calendar day at 30,580, certified staff hours, 40,360. That shows the delta between the cost. And yes, Kristen and the staff has been very efficient in hiring for ESY. The process already started. So we are confident these numbers are accurate. I'm on 217, Chris. These are fairly self-explanatory going from account 12001. Most of these numbers really do reflect, and we looked at consultant services, utilizing consultant-based services because of staffing shortages and continued recovery needs. We've spoken about psychologists, we've spoken about different supports that we've had to contract for. So the delta in those two numbers is really based on our consultant services and staffing shortages. For contracted speech, contracted OT, contracted PT, most of that represents an increase in salaries and costs for our contracted services. There has been substantial increases in those areas. Professional development, we've continued working with Wilson. We continue working on our DBT programs. We're continuing working with specially designed instruction. I know we had spoken earlier in December that we're hoping to resume work with Dr. Friend, and we will keep the board posted when we know more about that opportunity. As far as NEC, we're going to continue working with the ACE curriculum encyclopedia. And of course, we're going to continue working with our ABA training. And as far as PMT, Laura coordinated efforts in August, and we're very proud to say we've trained 90 of our paraprofessionals, I believe, at the August time date as well. And we'll continue PM training on an ongoing basis. As far as special education workshops, I think we just put that in. They're all posted on our website. We're delighted that we finally have been able to really capture our parent workshops and training opportunities on our special education website. As far as transportation, I think Rich spoke earlier to it as well. The increase really reflects the contractual rates and the change of numbers again for those ESY days in 24. As far as our outer district transport, again, that's a 5% increase that we're anticipated. I don't know if Rich has anything to add to that color, but I think we're standing at that right now. As far as our proposed budget for tuition public schools, it reflects our current student and projected student placements. You can see that there is a decrease in that number as well. Many of our students have returned to district. We've been able to design programs to support them. So you'll see the decrease in that, and we're excited that they've been able to return successfully. For tuition non-public, that reflects our students who participate in out-of-district programs, as well as recommended by IEP, and agreements with families who unilaterally place their students in out-of-district placements. And lastly, general teaching supplies. I know that's come up, that technology and what we can do. We're still using magnets for Wilson. We're still using really hand manipulatives for a lot of our specially designed instruction. So that's not going to go away with computers. We still need to hold on to those, and they are expensive. And a lot of that is in manipulatives and using those important materials for our programs.
Shirley, if we could stay on 218 just real quick, and maybe we could just knock this off quickly. But Rich, I don't know, it might be in here some way, but on these transportation costs associated with special ed, do you have you're keeping track of something of what while we're spending these dollars, we're saving X dollars by the fleet of Suburbans that you've invested in?
So every Suburban, it varies on how much we save, but it's between $40,000 and $60,000 compared to going out to a per vehicle to a third party provider.
Okay.
Per vehicle.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Shirley. Sorry to interrupt, but
I just wanted to add to that. The Suburbans really have been really supportive for many of our youngest kids that we're transporting who have difficulty being on a larger bus or being on they've just been really wonderful, and the drivers have been as well.
Good. Excellent.
And lastly, excess costs per pupil. The formula is there. I think it's self-explanatory and where we are. And I know it's been spoken at a prior board meetings. Rich probably can answer any questions also beyond this excellent explanation that he wrote, by the way.
Thank you, Shirley. I know we've got Scott even put a tie on for us on a Saturday. I know it's for us. You're not having anything else to do in your life, right? But and Kristen's here and Laura's back. Thank you. So with that, I'll turn it over to board questions.
Before the board questions, if
Yes.
I may just, since all of our program directors are here to say one thing.
Sure.
And I know we've said it before at other meetings. So the one thing in special education is that, and student services, is you want to make sure that there's a spiral and a continuum from elementary to middle into high school. And I think we've been committed over these last 8 years to build that. That's why we're all present today. But you can see when we go through the articulation process, you can see as we build programs that we're building them to align. We're building our DLC to align to our ALC, to align to our Excel. We're building our AIM to align to our core. So please know that we're mindful that our children are being educated ELP through 12 plus, and we need to design our programs accordingly. So I just wanted to thank our program directors while they're on that screen for doing that so outstandingly.
So the only thing I'll add to that, and thank you, Shirley, and thank you for the Zoom team on the screen. I will say thank you to the whole team here. You've gotten a lot of feedback at various board meetings over the last couple of months about special ed. I think you've done some great presentations and a great special ed update, and you've gone over the challenges that are there. And I think the ongoing open dialogue will continue, and I think we appreciate that from a board perspective. I know the community appreciates it, and we'll continue to be open and transparent into communications, our needs and our challenges around special ed. But just to reinforce it, the board is here to support what you need from a special ed standpoint. We'll continue to be here.
Thank you.
Sure. Good. John Cini.
I guess following up on the chair's comments, I mean, this is a budget for next year, and maybe this isn't quite appropriate for even this discussion, but why not kickstart some of these initiatives, hires this year? I mean, is it solely, are these additions solely focused on how the student body changes in a
good question
on a school year, or is it just the happenstance we're talking about these additions in the context of a budget, but can they be, some of these resources be added earlier?
Thank you for the question, John. The Oxford, I'll take the Oxford separately first. The Oxford we've been able to manage because we have contracted service providers. I wouldn't change that now. You know, I wouldn't change service to kids. They know our kids, they're working with them.
Yeah.
So that's why I really wouldn't look to that. And that includes speech and language pathologists and some outside consulting. So I would leave that doing that. We've been able to design, we actually have added additional para support in the Excel program. Someone who's very familiar with our school and our programs there to really help support our Excel program. And Christina Ross Taylor and Scott have helped to really find a way to support that Excel program. I don't know that I'd ask to change it now using our resources. And I do think we're going to start, and I've spoken to Marge, we will start looking for hiring because we realize that that it's an anticipated vacancy once the board approves it, if hopefully the board will approve it and look to see, looking at availability. I don't know, we can find people right now. So I think we're going to use the resources we have and the relationships our students and teachers have with them.
But I think I will follow up on Mr. Cini, and then the board can chime in or shut me down pretty quickly. I appreciate what Mr. Cini said, and I want to reiterate, and now that it's public, that if you need something now, raise your hand.
Okay.
And I think part of the challenge, and I'm glad you said it, is it's easy for us to say you have what you need, even if you need it now, even though we're talking about next year. The challenge is finding the people, is what I've continuously been hearing. But whatever you need to get the process started, to find the people, to recruit the people, if you need people to start now or sooner than later, then I think as a board, we want to hear that, because I think we want to support that.
We would greatly appreciate starting now.
Okay.
Well, yeah.
Yes.
So maybe that's a next, that's not at this discussion, but our next.
Yep. Good. That's fine. Good. Happy to hear it. We have Jack here. He's got a checkbook down there, so we're good to go. Sarah.
I have a question about 24013, the special ed testing. What does that include? And to date, we've only spent 13.6 of that. And is that, it seems like it's very second semester heavy. What is included in that?
We're looking at additional testing that we're going to use, some additional assessments that we're going to be training our staff on and looking at. So we haven't purchased them yet.
Okay.
The FAR is one of them. Some are different phonological assessments. So we're deciding which ones we're going to choose in the training. So Christian's coordinating that right now with Scott, and we'll be looking to do our training probably in the spring.
So you anticipate spending that entire 53? Yeah. Okay, yes.
Julie.
Similarly, pupil evaluation. It looks like it's gone down over the years and budgeted to be down next year versus this year. I'm not sure that I know exactly what that is though, and how can it be going down?
It's outside evaluations that we contract for pupil evaluations. Don't want to answer the question without really looking where very often it has trends and it goes up at certain times of the year and down. So I'd rather come back and share the information with Dr. Adley to share with the board. So I give an accurate answer.
Perfect, thanks.
Katie.
Thank you. I would echo Julie's question. I noticed that as well, that it's down 22%, what's budgeted for next year for now, which sounds really concerning to me, considering that a lot of the language in RC 24 says that we're expecting more students to need more services. So how can evaluations be going down? I also just want to echo and appreciate the comments from the other board members. It's really hard to reconcile how we don't need things now, given what we're hearing week after week in comments. And, I understand that staffing is hard to find right now, but I'm curious if we don't need to look more at our consultant services numbers. Do we need to increase those numbers? Do we need to increase those numbers this year in order to get students what they need, based on the fact that we continually are having members of the public come to a podium to say, my kids aren't getting what they need. And then in trying to understand some of the context that you've given in terms of programs that are changing and students that are moving up, I'd like to start with the context of what is the right ratio of teachers and students in a specialized program? What is the right ratio for a DLC program, for ALC and Excel? I'm having a really hard time understanding how Excel was at 6 students with a teacher, and that was good. And then it's at 11. And that's.
Well, I can answer all those questions. The first question is contracted service providers are having as much difficulty as we are having staff. They have people who are hired one day and leave the next day. So they're having the same issues we have. Marge just told me recently we're still looking for a psychologist. I think, Marge, did you say there were 78 vacancies in the state of Connecticut? 38. I was close. 38. Okay. And the 8 was right. And I think 7 are in there. 10. Okay, 10. Close again. The second part is there is not a formula for ratio between students in any of our specialized programs or in supplemental programs. And resource rooms are doing that. It's based on who the students are and what their needs are. So there's not a magic number at all. Also, many of our students in our specialized programs spend a great deal of time in general education classes during the day also. They're in and they have to be supported generally by a paraprofessional who goes out. So a teacher may have 4 kids at a time and not 8. It's very rare. Often in Brittany's program, actually, the time that most of the students, and it's still not a complete class, are together is when they're doing some home ec activities or they're doing some different kinds of life skill activity. But our students are involved in classes throughout the day in Middlesex and in the high school. So they're not in their specialized program all day. So there's not a formula that one can give. And there's also, depending on who the students are. Some of our students in our specialized program have direct reading and they're out with a 1-to-1 for reading while other students are in a small group. So no one can really give you a number, nor should they, because it's based on who the students are and what their schedule is and what their activities are.
I appreciate that context. I guess I would just come back to, sort of asking for an update rather than an overview annually. I think that there is context that we can give without it all being identifiable, even just to say this year's class has students in the general education classroom, X amount of percentage, right? Versus I think just some sort of context, because unfortunately the difficulty as a board member and sort of understanding why is 11 okay this year when 6 was okay last year? That's a very hard thing for us to understand without some sort of analytical context. And I fully appreciate that the children are individual. And I think that the board does too, but it's quite a leap for us just to say 6 is okay one year, 11 is okay. Like, we don't know what a threshold is to be able to support. So then the follow-up to that is, as you were talking about how students move in between, you know, a consolidated classroom versus the general education classrooms, how does the one additional SET at DHS, how is that enough to cover both a growing Excel program and also provide, you know, to quote, significant increase in direct reading instruction? How does one FTE do both of those?
Depending on the students and what their schedules are. For instance, you might have teachers teach 5 periods a day. You might have one direct reading class that teacher picks up, and she might have 4 periods in Excel, depending on the program and the design. You might have 2 direct reading classes that she does, and she might do 3 or he may do 3 periods within the class. So, and again, Katie, there's no right answer because it's really looking at the student's program. So the answer is, we're confident that one special education teacher, knowing our students that are currently in the program and our students who are moving up and the support they have, would be able to address our needs.
Anyone else? Thank you, Katie. Jill.
On the subject of caseloads, I'd like to talk a little bit about Excel and the nature of Excel, because you've got students who are early high school, kind of doing 9th grade content, through students who are transitioning. So I'd just love to talk for you to give us a little color on how you think about one or two case managers who could be fairly different jobs in terms of what the kids might be looking to accomplish in their time in the classroom.
I think under the auspices of both Scott and Christina and myself is the notion of we'd really look at the design of how we would use the 2 teachers. A lot of it would be their design. They would sit down, teachers plan together, and it's almost a team teaching, especially when you have 2 teachers working with a cohort of students. So I would be confident they would look at the design, they would look at the structure of the kind of program that transitioning kids need, because there's a different emphasis, and design, and incoming students who are just entering their freshman year. So I think a great deal of it would be the design of the program, looking at the students, looking at their courses, and then designing it enthusiastically of what they could create and how they would have their programs.
Okay, but a certain amount of the transitioning is if we could just build on it a little, is getting kids out in the community, and that takes somebody out of the building. So, how
they may design that they're both doing at the same time. I mean, we can use our Suburbans now also.
Yes.
They might decide that they have different activities to go to. There may be some going to the library because they're doing some work study at the library, and there may be some going shopping and preparing meals.
Right.
So I think, again, I'm confident they would creatively and responsively to their students say, this is what our community work should look like.
Yeah.
And the frequency and duration of it also.
Yeah.
Some kids the older kids transition might need to really spend the whole day out because they have some responsibilities and they're keeping records of what they're doing, and they're doing travel training, and they're doing money exchange, and they're looking at all those different transitional skills. Whereas our younger learners might be looking at just going to the library or doing some community visits.
Right. So, but right now we have one person who's responsible for both. So what you were saying is we've got other staff who come in and help support because of the complexity of what you're describing.
Our OT does it. Terry does a lot of the work with them. Terry does a lot of work with the travel training as well, and going out. I know that the speech language pathologist does as well, is working with that. So some of the other related service providers, and Terry's been doing it consistently. Who's one of our OT who does middle school and high school, has a real sense of who the students are because she's worked with them typically for at least 3 or 4 or 5 years, and she's been very helpful. Paul also, our BCB ABA, goes out into the community as well, and he works and helps with all of the travel training and the different activities in the community. So I think the other providers really do give that balance of support.
Okay, thank you.
I think, Shirley, to Katie's questions and even Jill's, I'll be honest, I have a daughter that's part of this program, so I live it and see it every day. There are a lot of moving parts to it, and as it has grown, I think you've adjusted, and I give you credit in that the the programmatic side of it some of them are part of running a coffee truck around the high school and delivering coffee and learning how to sell and make change. They go out to restaurants, they go to Costco, they work at a garden center. So a lot of moving parts, and it might help the board. I understand Katie and the numbers and the ratios, but just, at some point in time, we'll also maybe talk a little bit more about the program and the fact that there's just so many moving parts. And there's so many different types of kids. I don't know if it's the right thing to say. I apologize if it isn't, but so many unique individuals in that program. And I think it does a great job, but I think you've heard it from the board, whatever you need, because I think it's a program that's going to continue to grow. But I think also to some of these questions, it would help just to get a update of those dynamics. I mean, I've sat in a coffee shop in town where 2 Suburbans pull up and all those kids dump out and dump into the coffee shop. And it's like the best part of the day. And I get up and leave rather quickly. But I think the questions are appreciated, and maybe down the road, we'll get more of an update on it.
We'd
Yeah.
be delighted to.
Good, thank you. I swing over to Dennis.
Yeah, with that, Duke, I think it's, maybe I'm looking at this again too financially, but I don't think so. I think, if we look at just tuition, public schools, tuition, non-public schools, we're saving $250,000 than we did last year. And I'm going to take that as the investment we've made in special education has been the win of saving we've spent money, but you're still saving money in the long term. But the benefit is now you're teaching the children in the district that they belong. They're not being bused somewhere else. So that's a win-win for the district. And I think we need to celebrate that more. And I don't want to make more work, but it'd be interesting to know what that 250 would have been if we didn't bring all this work in-house. Could you elaborate? Could you speculate? That's maybe the better word. What that would have cost us to not do this. Does that make sense? I mean, I think that's again something for communication to deliver, that we're doing all of this work and we're not only saving money, we're bettering a student's educational outcome, which I think is a great thing to celebrate. And we probably don't do that well enough.
Well, I think to your point, Dennis, it's not about we've saved 250,000. It's how do we take that 250 and invest it back into the program.
But but again, it's a win. You reduce your money spent to fund other school districts and keep the students in our school district.
Sarah.
Thank you. I would just love to know and this is again, not necessarily for today, but going forward, to Dennis's point about it's best to have kids in district, right? So what can we do going forward to create other opportunities to maybe not have that outplacement? Is there anything that we could be building in-house that could help to keep kids in Darien? I'd just be curious to know what thoughts are around that and how we can maybe invest more to save money in the long run.
Good. I'll go over to Katie real quick.
Thank you. I wanted to ask for some information regarding professional development. I see that you have listed out a few areas that you plan for the special education budget, which is great. But it would be nice to see see some of the results of the investment in professional development. So for example, how many of our staff are level 1 certified in Wilson? How many are above that? It's great to know that you guys are working towards that, but it would also be nice to know what we have in-house and how that's growing over time. As much as, we teach our students to be lifelong learners, I think our teachers want to be as well. So that would be a nice trend to see as well.
We could certainly do a memorandum to Dr. Allen, to the board. Currently this year, we have 7 teachers K through 12 who are working toward level 1 certification in Wilson. Kristen coordinates that, and we can certainly get that information.
Thank you, Shirley. Great. Continued board questions. Dennis.
Yeah, so I'm reading the line, the increased number of referrals have requested increased time to conduct evaluations for all psychologists. And I realize we have a director of mental health coming on, a wellness coordinator coming on, the Team Talk Kids in Crisis coming on, and there's a lot of moving pieces. But to echo board members as well, as if we find out that we need more psychologists, I want to be able to do that quickly and not wait until the next budget cycle to bring people in. So all I keep saying, as I read this sentence, all I keep hearing is Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. And I'm wondering, are we staffed enough to have this? And as we increase school psychologists, there seems to be more needs, and whether I don't think we're creating the need. I think we're just providing the opportunity to have students commit. And I just wonder what we can do more of that. So I'm happy to, I don't want to add more to the budget, but I'm happy to add in this specific instance. And if we have to wait until we get these moving pieces together, I encourage Dr. Adley and you, Mrs. Klein, to bring this forward to the board as soon as possible if you determines we need more.
Thank you.
So just a quick follow-up on that. Again, just a comment, Shirley, and you'll take it and run with it. But if I look at contracted speech, contracted OT, contracted PT, you've got there, the increase represents, the proposed budget represents an increase in provider rates, but it also represents an increase based on IEP recommendations. The rates are what the rates are, but I would just ask we make sure we have built in there what you think we need from a delivery to our students for IEPs. I think we find ourselves sometimes caught up in doing a lot of transfers between some of these categories, which is fine because you don't have a crystal ball on this stuff as the year goes on, but I think it's all right to do some anticipation on here. So I think that's good. The only other thing I'll throw on the table just real quickly, I think to Dennis's point, I spoke to Dr. Adley about this and I spoke to Rich about it. As I start to see the lights go on in the federal realty property, I want an understanding on kind of a regular basis what the potential enrollment uptick is from those areas. And I think it'll be important to look at what the uptick is on students coming in from those areas and then what maybe the corresponding need is from a special ed standpoint too. I think it's just something we have to be on top of, and I think we have to be ahead of it actually. So, okay, Jill.
I wanted to go back to the question of psychologists and pupil evaluations. Is part of the reason that that number is down because we now do have an additional psychologist at the high school who can take some of the load? Yes, thank you.
Good. All right, good questions. Thank you, Shirley, Kristen, Scott, Laura. Hang on just another minute as we go out to our partners here. Anything, Ed?
On the consultants, the $1.5 million in consultants, can we get more detail on how that money is spent across the different services? And on the out of district placements, some of the line items like speech pathologists, you talk about the number of students that are being served versus what was there before. Could we get the same numbers for placement so we understand again, is it because the students are being reduced?
Thanks, Ed. Jack.
I have one comment and it sort of fills in on what Dennis was saying. When we added school psychologists, I don't think we created something. I think, if I recall, we were filling a need where the people who were there were already overloaded. And so we just spread some of the work out. Now that it's there, maybe more people are being willing to go there because of the established of what's there. So I think that's part of it. Now, I'm never really known for being subtle.
For being what?
Subtle.
Subtle?
Yeah.
I'm surprised that word came out of your mouth.
But I'm gonna try.
I appreciate that, Jack, because we're done here at 3:50.
Yeah, no shit. Sorry. I know Darien doesn't just hire bodies. We want to make sure we have qualified people to fill the open spots that we have. But I'm hearing in certain cases, there's a difficulty fulfilling some of those spots. And while I understand in the budget, we have to have those spots, and this isn't special ed, this is district-wide. I'm starting to think that really now with the teacher shortage and other professional shortages that are countrywide, not just statewide or in our town, whether or not we have something where we have what we've requested FTEs versus what the actual FTEs in those spots are. And whether or not in one of the administration areas, we could have a vacancy line because we may not be fully staffed system-wide across, even though we have the budget in the budget, we may be short a person here, short a person there, and similar to where we have the turnover, whether or not there might be a vacancy line to just be there also to deal with a little bit of the reality of what all school systems are experiencing now.
Do you get that, Rich? Okay.
Don't we do that on
Yeah.
In the finance committee, don't you show us?
I mean, we do flag what's considered salary savings, which is really the gap in time between when somebody left and somebody's hired and that you're
Right,
not
so
actually
you-
paying out a salary, which is different than turnover savings, which is the savings that materialize from hiring somebody less expensive than the person who left.
But maybe a running head count.
Yeah, I mean, typically we show it in the line item that occurs. So if a para, for example, is vacant, you might accumulate, let's say, 20 days of salary savings because that's the time it wasn't filled. And we'll show that as the balance in the applicable account.
All right. All right. Thanks, Jack. CDSP.
Taking out furniture. Wow, so I'm impressed. A lot of this is a very long list and a lot of stuff's been grayed out already. So I applaud the board for your excellent questions.
Thank you.
So as far as still the FTE for Excel and direct reading, and there's still some of the lingering questions we had was that direct reading and Excel are two very, it's the same, qualifications, but very different settings, very different activities. And sometimes with special education teachers, case management hours are not always realized on service grids. They're not always realized in the IEP, maybe on the accommodations page, but just that interaction with families, that interaction with the general ed teachers, that those kids are going into classes. They also need that time to coordinate with teachers and make sure accommodations and modifications are being done. So there's a lot more hours involved than just sort of, 2 periods a day, 1 period a day. And I would imagine for that teacher that's going to be split between direct reading, which seems like it's a real need considering that we are implementing a secondary reading program, is very different from the activities that you're doing in an Excel program when you're in a room that's pretty much a self-contained classroom with a schedule and lots of kids with very individual needs. So I think we should revisit how we're going to split that FTE up. And if we do need an additional one for Excel, and then you face the reality of needing someone for direct reading. There's questions, the big committee, so I apologize. The SCT at Ox, why is only 1 certified staff needed at elementary? Ox special education teacher seems to be for DLC specifically, but if we need 4 more pairs at Ox and 2 at homes for incoming K students, shouldn't we be looking at more special education teachers as well? Consulting, we discussed the increase. Just want to know what the status of Maryland Friends inclusive education work was going on with the district. Professional development looks exactly the same with all the hires of new staff, with staff turnover. Has there been an assessment to see what PD needs we have to bring new staff up to speed? Professional development for, I know Shirley, you touched on sort of the alignment of all of your programs, ELP plus. We talk about transitions. So there's one transition that comes at the end, which is transition to post-secondary. So we would like to see if there's any PD for post-secondary transition for counselors. There are many more options for students with disabilities to attend 2 or 4-year programs. Staff need to be familiar with the nuanced admissions process and tour the programs. So I don't know if this is something that's more appropriate to be put in the DHS RC, but wanted to make sure professional development for evolving post-secondary planning is included. Contracted OT. I feel like this is an item that is goes back to my CPAC days, but 900,000. And I'm just going to say it, is it cheaper than to hire district employees if we're continuing to pay this huge nut for contracted OT? And then just for clarity, is the entitlement cap of 70% a guarantee or just the maximum possibility? And we don't really know until the end of the year 2024. Is there more money needed to assist with tracking services lost during this shortage? Additional administrative support to make sure the reporting systems to families is keeping up with the anticipated higher activity. I know that at the last meeting, we mentioned that families might be requesting service logs and families might need to have a running list of what the services are going to be missing. And do you have the administrative support to support those requests? Is there money to address the comp ed for missed services. Comp ed can sometimes be more expensive. In addition to comp ed, legal fees and settlements and mediations and due process that have to address the shortages and the missed services. And I think finally is just, and this is probably separate from the budget, but what is the status of the tokenique psychologist? Thank you.
Thank you. CPAC or CDSP?
Catherine Perkowski, 152 Old Kings Highway North. Sarah, do you need me to spell that? I am the special education rep at the high school, and I wanted to share with you all that we are hearing from parents who have children in the Excel program that they need help now rather than later. We have, I don't know how many of you know her, but we have an exceedingly hardworking, help me, department chair. And I think she's making up for a lot of what's sort of going wrong now in Excel, and she's trying to think carefully about it. But she's only one person, and she's also the same person who's dealing with the training for the new IEP program. So I think what we're hearing is there is more of an urgency now to fill a teacher position for that program, just from a parent perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. CPAC?
Hi. So Trisha Bresnahan for CPAC. And we had sent, you mentioned at Duke about the email that we had sent. So should we send that email again with all of our questions, and can that be part of this
Tricia,
record?
I appreciate that. We have that email and what Dr. Alley and I spoke about, what's specific to budget this year, and then what's just, we need to have a meeting and kind of go over some of that stuff and the good feedback that you have in that. So we have that on our list.
Okay, so we, and to save time, aren't going to ask all those same questions. We're just going to ask the ones that had come up since then that are on the budget. So because that will, the budget ones will then be on the budget record, right? Or we can send those again. Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Good. So we looked at the PD line too, didn't see an increase, and wondered if there should be an increase in PD. And also, since as someone also mentioned, Marilyn Friend hasn't been able to do any PD, if that perhaps there could be a new person hired for some co-taught team PD. And regarding the new special education teachers, it's great that there's going to be some new, but we agree with Shirley and the rest of the board that perhaps that needs to happen now, particularly at the high school. And some of those kids, it's really more than 11 because not everyone is there at all the times. They kind of cycle in and out, and there's a lot going on. And I think that it's great that if someone is going to be new next year, but I think they need some support. And a para cannot be a certified teacher. It's nice that they're getting another body in there maybe, but it's concerning because you don't want a para being teaching, which I know Shirley doesn't. And the other thing is we would like to see a breakdown also of that teacher's role between reading and being able to cover kids' IEPs at the high school. And the other was the tracking of missed services, that if this is just being done on an individual basis by teachers and service providers, can this actually be tracked? It would be good to compare it year over year to see if, what gets implemented could help stop so many missed sessions, but it doesn't seem like it's being tracked. Thank you.
Thank you, Tricia. Public comments on RC 24 special ed. Anyone online, Chris? No. Okay, good. Thank you all. Dr. Abbott.
I'm just wondering, John or anybody want a further explanation of the excess costs? Or is everybody okay?
Good question. John, you want to, Rich?
So I asked Rich to outline the full calculation of the excess costs and how it was calculated in the past and how it's been calculated or forecasted. The calculation was made for the forecast. And so I haven't had a chance to look at this. I don't know if it's worth running through it or reviewing it and coming back.
Rich, do you want to do a quick run through while we have a in-house and online
Yes,
audience?
we can do it quickly. So the budget is assuming essentially 59,
Just make sure you got your microphone there. Thank
So
you.
the budget assumes 59 budgeted claims. The threshold that we budgeted for was 107,961. So the total cost is a little over 10 million. So you have to spend the $107,000 for those 59 students before you get reimbursed. And then it's the excess above that. So of the $3.6 million, which is above the 107, a 70% reimbursement rate gets you about 2.55 million. We did break down how we actually come up with the $107,000 threshold. So we compared it to what is the current year. And so it's all based on a state report that we file at the end of August called the EFS. So it looks at a bunch of moving pieces. So what are you going to spend this year? Right. So which is still in flux. And then it actually backs out certain things like DSS revenue. It adds in what they call in-kind services. So things that aren't in our budget, but are an in-kind service from the town. So like the SROs, the crossing guards, those are all considered in-kind services. And then what the state considers minor capital. So minor capital could be the replacement of a truck, for example, the wireless clocks at Tokenique from this year, that's considered an in-kind service. Then it adds back the excess cost revenue that you got from the current year. And then it takes into account what you're going to spend in your federal funds. And so it only takes into account what you actually spend, not necessarily what you carry over. So federal funds like the IDA grant, the ARP grant, the title grants, then it adds back in any other, let's say, private donations that you may have gotten. So a good example would be the robotics donation that we got. Then it deducts out certain transportation costs. So it looks at what did you spend as a district in total transportation, whether it be home to school, athletics, special education, field trips, music transportation, anything like that. It reduces out the cost of special education transportation, plus the cost of a transportation coordinator gets reduced out. Then it also deducts out ELP tuition. So any tuition you gathered for students that you had here. And then that gives you a total amount. And then it looks at your average daily membership. And so for budgeting purposes, we really just look at what is the forecasted total students. But when you actually come down to it, when the state applies, it's an average daily membership of the students that you are actually responsible for. And that gets you an estimated per pupil of 23,991. And then you multiply that by 4.5 and you get the 107,961. So when you fast forward a year and you start looking at what are you going to collect for excess costs, there's a number of things that can change that calculation. Where your provider rates exactly what you budgeted, whether higher or lower. Salaries for teachers can change. So we budgeted based on the salaries we know we have, but if let's say you hired an SLP that was either less or more, that changes the calculation. Were there new services provided? Were there services that changed? Were there services that you no longer have to provide? Were there placement changes? Were there new students attending the district? Were there students leaving the district? Was the amount you spent in the current year that you estimated exactly what you spent at the end of the year? When the audit gets complete. So there's a ton of moving pieces when it comes to excess costs and how you actually get that reimbursement. But the important part is it's always 4.5 times what you spent above that threshold. So the threshold can change. And one of the things we saw this year was our threshold was much lower than we anticipated. It was about $5,000 lower. Part of that had to do with enrollment. So was our enrollment higher? Was our enrollment lower? So those all play into the fact of what you collect for excess cost.
See, it's that simple.
Yeah,
It's that simple. And that's why we have how many full-time people working on this? And that's why we have, thank God we have Rich. This is like phenomenal.
Can you post that?
Yeah, we'll put it on the
Thank you.
website.
Yeah. Good.
We also.
Yeah, no, Dennis, we're done.
With this, you know, for years, I think we've always focused on a reimbursement rate. There's the threshold. Can we go back, and I don't know if we have it or not, but I guess the question I'm asking is how accurate are your threshold approximations versus I don't even care about reimbursement rate because that's settled now. How accurate are your threshold approximations?
So it fluctuates. It really depends on enrollment. So this past year, our threshold estimate was much higher than it actually came in at. And part of that was, and we saw it play out during the year, was we had a lot less students than we anticipated.
So your cost per student goes.
So your cost per student goes way up. So that makes a difference. The other issue is how do you spend your federal grants? And so federal grants, unlike an appropriation, carries forward multiple years. So they don't care if, if you spend it like a portion this year and the rest comes in the next year, they're only going to count what you spent as of June 30th. So if some of our appropriation, for example, was ESY, how much of that ESY was for the 4 days in June is what they're going to count. They don't care that you spent the rest in July for the rest of ESY, because then that'll count for the next year's appropriation. So it's also the timing of what you spent. And then again, it's overall, like our forecast last year, I think we thought we would give back about 650. We ended up giving back, I think it was around 670. So that differential will play a little bit of a role as well. And then in-kind services, how much of our in-kind services are going to change? Those are not in your budget, but they get charged to your per pupil.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Jim. Sorry.
No, you're good.
Chatting time.
I'll get you a coffee after this. So in terms of what we're hearing from the legislature, again, as Dennis just said, they've settled in at 70%, but I know when we had the last legislative breakfast, Alan, they were talking about still tinkering with the formula because so many districts, we were impacted to the positive, but a lot of districts were not, or to the negative, whatever. Yes. But a lot of districts went to the positive then. So what confidence do we have in where we think the legislature is settled on this?
So this is the first year of this new tiering system based on town wealth. So for Darien, it was a negative impact. We're going to lose revenue because of the new tiering system, because we're in the top 58 in wealth.
Right.
So whether or not it stays, it doesn't stay, it kind of remains to be seen. They haven't indicated that they plan on changing it. But the alternative is to go back to what they had, where it's a pot of money. Everybody submits their claims. You see how much you actually have available, and then you get your haircut essentially on what's reimbursed.
Okay.
So could it change? It certainly could change. And this is the first year, and a lot of districts were up in arms because the change happened in May, which was post when everybody in the state really set their budget. And so for certain districts, it worked out better. For a lot of districts, it did not.
Right. Well, I think what they were saying at the legislative breakfast is that it didn't work out well for a lot of districts, that a lot of districts ended up not where they expected to be.
Correct. I mean, for the most part, the districts that made out were the more urban districts, the Bridgeports, the Hartfords, the New Havens.
Right.
And even for them, it's actually a less of a reimbursement rate than they got last year when the state reimbursed 80%. So it was even a little bit smaller than them, but better than probably the average of the last, few years. But the majority of towns, it has not been better.
You said a lot had to do with submissions and people were waiting on submissions, right? Where we stayed kind of ahead of it, right?
So in the past, before this formula, what would happen is everybody in the state would submit all their claims. They'd see how much money they had available, and then they'd reimburse you based on what they had available. I think it was a year or two ago, there were a couple districts that did not submit on the first go around, so December 1st.
Right.
And so what ended up happening is they set a percentage rate that everybody was expecting them to get based on those December 1st submissions. Everybody gets a second opportunity to submit in March. There was a couple of districts that didn't submitted. And so then the total pool of eligible claims went up, but the amount they had to pay out was flat. So then everybody has to get compressed here.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Rich, again, for bringing it down to, some common sense. All right, if we want to do a 1-minute break for coffee. My goal of 350, I know, is ambitious. No pressure, Chris Tranberg. Quick.